At some point in your reality shifting adventure, you are going to be between worlds. But depending on where you're starting from, where you're shifting into, and there are transition zones along the way. Remember that things in the reality shifting journey stay coherent, meaning you don't just wake up one day and you're missing an arm or you have a new tattoo. Although there are some wild stories that have been reported, what I have observed as a neuroscientist who has been so excited by this opportunity to explore, and also with my Bachelor of Science degree in psychology, like this is like a dream come true for me. And so you have somebody teaching you that is excited, that understands the brain, that understands the sensory system, that understands the cognition inside and what it takes to be able to open yourself up to reality shifting, to actually reality shift and be aware of it. Can people reality shift without being aware? Yes, under certain conditions. But if you're trying to navigate, drive your ship to manifest the life of your dreams, then it's important to realize what it means to be in human form, assuming that you're a human origin listener. And I have other listeners on the line, but I'm predominantly speaking from the human perspective. And so when you are enmeshed or ensnared or trapped in human cognition, it means that, especially if you're coming from a binary society where you're having to expand your mind beyond just space and time, physics is already headed in that direction. Like, it turns out that there's this new discovery that things might exist beyond our space-time box. It's really fascinating once you take a look into it. And there's apparently some special features of geometry and embedded in our world. When certain scientists look at it, it appears that there is computer code. You can find it yourself. It's amazing if you haven't already been exposed to this content. So the breakthroughs in our understanding of neuroscience and physics, like, let me back up a second. Dr. Donald Hoffman, in The Case Against Reality, is proposing that, based on his findings and other people that are on the forefront of these discoveries, our concept of space-time is quickly becoming outdated, and that there is, in fact, existence and consciousness beyond where we ever thought was possible before. And Dr. Donald Hoffman will say that we actually don't exist, not in the way that we perceive that we do, but it is our housing units. Our interfaces is the word that he uses. How we interface with reality dictates our experience of it. And what we are observing is that science and people on the forefront of these perceptual experiences are having some amazing insights that reality is not the way that we were taught on TV. And isn't that amazing? But it takes a process of upgrading the perceptual system. It takes a series of reconfiguring the modules of your thinking, the very paradigms in which you exist in and live in, and the world exists in. Like, imagine for a moment that everybody's a reality shifter. How many calendars do we have? How many maps do we have? It changes the very nature of the foundational backbones and infrastructures to our societies. Yes, plural, societies. And so now we get to the personal experience of reality shifting. And there are some people on the forefront of this. There are many that are not. But this is changing as people continue to awaken, as people continue to have the expansion of their cognition and their awareness beyond just the space-time linear existence that we have always known. So at some point, you're going to be between worlds, but you might not know that you're between worlds. And until your perceptual system is syncing with your new cognition, it takes a while. Just FYI, you're going to be intuitively aware and feeling that you're reality shifting before you really know it. And then you have to train your body to adapt to it through a process of habituation. And this is what we work through in coaching and one-on-one coaching, but you can do it on your own as well. And so you don't just wake up one day and a completely new life is the point. It is a process of upgrading, of working towards being able to experience that which is vastly different. Because what happens, this is what I have observed, when I have ported completely into different worlds, and this is other people's experience as well, it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick. And what you want to do is lengthen the amount of time that your perceptual system can handle being in a vastly different, disorienting environment, because it is very disorienting. And there is some physiological mechanism that we have in human form that causes a panic response. And indeed, when people suddenly lose space and time, like in dementia, it's not fun. It's not pleasant. It's not at all. And it's confusing. It's disorienting. Am I safe? Is it okay? I remember when I ported into Bali, I mentioned this recently, and I pulled myself back because I was like, do I have credit cards? Where's my car? I parked my car like, I'm not very good with distance, but some distance away and within walking distance, and had walked into the woods and in Dallas, Texas, and opened up this portal and saw the landscape start to change. The summer cicadas changed to monkeys, and the foliage started to change, and I started to freak out because it was like, wait a second, what am I doing? Where's my car? Is my car going to be there? Do I have credit cards? I didn't bring money with me. And all of that mind anxiety anchors you back into the present world. And so when you do those extreme shifts, and I have a lot of experience now doing some pretty extreme shifts, seeing different beings materialize, and that was kind of fun. While I was driving, and some of them were in my car, and one of them was really cute. It was like this little ET creature, and it was eating something that I had, like trash, or like paper on my floorboard. And I saw another being jump on top of an 18-wheeler, and the 18-wheeler swerved, and it was pretty intense. So then I've also seen different cityscapes, and walking out to your balcony in Costa Rica expecting to see the ocean, and you start to see a skyline come in, and you have no idea where it's at. It's not a pleasant moment. It's like a what type of moment? Or being in your bedroom and then suddenly porting into somebody else's bedroom and sensing that you're in bed with some random dude, and you're like, wait a second, I'm not going there. Who is this person? And or hearing people around that you're not familiar with. And so it's disarming. And as a result, this anchors us into what we've always known. Not to mention, from the neuroscience perspective and the psychological perspectives, we're actually wired. We're fundamentally wired to prefer the familiar. Literally, in the prefrontal cortex, they have done studies. This is so relevant. Even though it was not categorized under reality shifting or consciousness, what they have observed is that there is more of a heightened reward with the familiar rather than the unknown, even if the familiar is a little bit painful. And so what this means is that we have a tendency, probably for our survival, it's probably an evolutionary mechanism, to want to maintain that which is familiar. Now, this is fine and dandy as a species, but when it comes to reality shifting, what it means is that it's a hindrance to jumping into a new world. So when I hear that people are jumping into new worlds and they're staying there for years or for eternity and they're new to reality shifting, I'm calling BS. I'm calling BS because I'm one of the most excited and enthusiastic travelers. And I have been so annoyed by the limitations of my own psychology and physiology. And understanding that I have been able to shift into vastly different worlds, sensing my body's mechanisms and the shutdown mechanisms, like there is adrenaline, a physiological response of adrenaline that is not in the driver's control. If you're in human form, there is some mechanism beyond your ability to control it, like the flight or fight mechanism. You don't get to choose that, right? If you're in a situation where you're confronted with a bear, you have that reaction regardless, right? And so as a result, when you're porting into different worlds, it's a process of habituation. And that's what a lot of what I believe, I don't watch a lot of content on reality shifting, but I believe this is where a lot of the frustration comes from based on the emails that I get for people that have been trying it. That's the process of habituation, where you get there for a second or two, you get to feel it, you get to preview it, and then you come back. And then you get there and you get to feel it maybe for 2 to 3 seconds. Actually, in reality, it's like you stay at microseconds and then you get to a second and then maybe a little while later you'll get to a second again and then a second again and a second 0.2, a second 0.25, a second 0.23, and then what happens is that you'll go back to a second, and I haven't figured this out, but you'll actually backtrack. And so you'll do this jump forward, backtrack a little bit, jump forward, backtrack a little bit, jump forward, backtrack. And it takes a while to adjust. And I'm speaking as a behavior therapist here, a former behavior therapist that has experience in training other people in how to habituate and how to learn new things. It is actually a process. It is a long, annoyingly long process. So what this means, this is the exciting thing, is that most people reality shift in a world that looks almost identical to the one that they're familiar with, except there might be a couple of things out of place. And I'd like to refer you back to one of my early episodes, the neuroscience of consciousness and intuition. It's episodes 2 and 3 in my reality shifting playlist, where I talk about Dr. Anil Seth's work, where essentially what happens is that there is a slow progression of change that is imperceptible. 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 Actually, you cannot tell, because the way your brain is wired is that the world can be moving very slowly. And Dr. Emil Jarfelt actually demonstrated this in his talk about consciousness and the nature of reality, and he's a forefront leader in neuroscience. And what he shows is that people listening to him while he has a PowerPoint behind him, the PowerPoint is of this pretty image of some interior of a house. It looks like a room, maybe an office. It's well designed. And while he's giving his talk, just over like 30 seconds or so, the room changes. But nobody noticed that it changed. Nobody noticed. Isn't that amazing? So literally, the image was shifting. Reality was shifting behind him. But the nature of the human mind is that it doesn't pick up on that. And so technically, you could be reality shifting all day and not be aware of it until there is an incongruency and your brain registers, I thought I put my phone over there. That's really weird. And the bigger the incongruency and the story that you have paired with it, the more discomfort you're going to feel. Like, for example, if you're sitting on a couch and you put your phone to the right of you, just, like you're sitting up and you put your phone down and you close your eyes and you do a sitting meditation just for a moment. You open your eyes and you reflexively reach down with your right hand to pick up your phone, and it's not there. If you live alone, that's going to drive you bonkers, right? And the story that you have about that is that most people are going to think that they're probably crazy, or that their ADHD is acting up, or that they're losing it. But now let's imagine that you're doing that at a coffee shop. The story that you're going to tell about that is different, right? Somebody stole it. Somebody stole my phone. Indeed, this is what happens when you start quantum traveling and you run into other travelers who are less experienced. You'll notice the stories that they bring along with them tend to be oriented towards that, versus those who are more experienced that smile and nod and be like, "Hey, Trinity." They'll call you by your call sign or talk about strange things that are happening to them, even though you're living in this reality that looks normal. You both know that it's not. And so this was a encounter that I had with somebody just randomly, and he picked me up and twirled me around 3 times, and we laughed, and after we acknowledged each other, and then we went separate ways, and I never saw him again. But then shortly thereafter, I met another traveler who was displaced, and it's very uncomfortable to be displaced. She was really struggling and having a very, very hard time. So I sat with her for a bit and tried to ground her as best as I could. And you'll see that there are signs and signals along the way. People put markings on the streets, sometimes with graffiti, or there will be stacks of stones or objects, especially in like vortex areas, and little cues that people will leave here and there. But normally in your everyday world, when you're reality shifting, you're going to have to pay attention to the incongruencies, and you're going to have to be mindful about the reactions that you have. Because when you start to really do it, it gets weird. It gets really weird. Like, for example, something I'm experiencing now is my emails load differently. And I have messages from inbound clients that show up one day and not another day. And so if you reach out to me and it takes me a little bit to get back to you, it might be because we're at a dimensional threshold that is too wide and we have to close the gap. Similarly, you'll have conversations with people and they will expect you to remember things that you never talked to them about. Or you'll see content load differently. Like I recently mentioned watching a video about portals, and I went back to look at that video and I couldn't load it, but it wasn't like it was taken down. The video was still accessible. It was just all black with no likes and no comments. And then I tried to load another part of that interview. It was with Billy Carson, and it wouldn't play. And then I waited a couple of days, and all of a sudden I can see the original video. I think it was by a different poster. I'm not really sure. I don't know who had the first one, but all of a sudden it was like everything was working again. So these are signs that you are shifting. If you are a reality shifter, and if that happens to be how you frame things. So your framing when you are between worlds is very, very important. Because if you default to, I'm going bonkers, my ADHD is acting up, or somebody's messing with me, if those are your top three, then you're going to lose the opportunity to really step into the reality of being a reality shifter. And you have an opportunity to co-create with the universe with that role and with that identity. And as a result, you can make that stronger, and you can have more interesting experiences in the world versus people just messing with you or you being a defective human being. You see the difference. One is you're stepping into a powerful role as a reality shifter, a creator, a manifester, an explorer. And sometimes you have to be a little patient because the preview windows take a little bit of time, and there's a whole process behind it. You know, like from your perspective, your body's perspective, you have to adapt. But then there's also a matching, like you're matching into a reality and a reality is matching into you, and it's got to be a good fit. And there is a selection process, sometimes with stringent criteria. So, you know, like it's not immediate, and for good reason on many, many counts. But it's fun if that's the role and the identity that you bridge into your experience. That's the opportunity on the table. So listen, I am indeed a reality shifting coach. If you'd like to hitch a lifeline to me and potentially work together, feel free to email me at sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com.